Yaranatato. Hello to all of us. This is our story tonight. This one is from Mangareva. This is another one of the stories in the series about the history and the legends of Mangareva. And Mangareva, if you don't know, it's this island that's far in the eastern part of the Polynesia. It's even east of, it's about 1,000 miles east of Tahiti. There was this man in the time of Tahiti, which is about in the 1300s. There was a man named Mariutea, and he came to Mangareva in the time of Tahiti. And his wife's name was Mariuora. She had another name as Mariutea, and it was later changed to Mariutea, Mariu of the turning head. And they lived in Gatavake, and the name of their house was Puorenga, Mariutea and Mariuora. And she gave birth to these following children: Raekeno, Hakatangi Tuatoto, Tanipawa, Tanihoi, Emutikino, Emutikayo, Rihau, and Rierie. And they were all sons. And she had a daughter. They had a daughter named Tara. And in time, the mother, Mariuora, she died. And when she died, her daughter, Tara, came from this other island called Akamaru, which is it's in the same lagoon as Mangareva, but there's a bunch of different islands in the same lagoon. It was from the other island there in the lagoon. And the daughter, Tara, came to mourn for her mother. And what she did is, Mariuora, before she died, she told her relatives or people, she said, when I'm buried, I want to be buried in a place where the cool winds blow from the sea, in a place called Te Hauotanioi. And after she was dead, her body was placed in state, was laid out in this marae, this worship ground called Te Kahika. And later on, her body was moved to Te Hauotanioi, this place that's blown next to the sea where the cool wind blows. And her head was taken by the sea. And her head floated along, and it was washed up, or it ended up on this rock called Te Pitua Tangata in a place called Tokarangi, which is it's in Rikitea. It's like up the coast from Rikitea. And her head lay on that rock. And out of her head grew legs, a body, arms, and a face of a baby. Okay, she grew again. And then the body grew, and it was like the body of a young girl, and the head was turning back and forth, and that's why her name was changed to Mariutea, Mariu with the turning head. And the body grew into the body of a young woman, and then she stood up and she started walking. She was alive again, and she was naked. And she walked kind of quietly in the bush so nobody would see her, and she crossed over the ridge, and she came to this place called Ngatihina. And she bathed in a pool there. And she was bathing in the pool, and there was a woman named Toaiti who came and stood next to the pool. And this woman, Mariuora, she asked that woman, give me some clothing, because Mariuora didn't have any clothing. So the woman gave her some clothing. And so then Mariuora dressed herself up in the clothing, and she went on down the coast. And she came to Gatavake, and when she came to Gatavake, it was nighttime. And she came to her house, and there were people gathered in her house. And they were having they were singing songs, and it was like lamenting the fact that she was dead. And her husband was inside the house with the people, and he looked out the door, and he could see her face in the firelight, and he thought, man, that woman looks a lot like my wife. Who is she? And after time they were done with the lamenting songs, and what they did was people went to sleep. So he went outside and he found his Mariuora, and he said, who are you? Where are you from? She said, I'm your wife, Mariuora. I've come back from the dead. And so he went in the house and he told the people not to sing any more songs to lament for her, because she'd come back to life. And then she lived with him, and they had 2 more kids. And now we go to the second part of the story. In time, the parents, Mariuora and Mariupoko. Mariutea and his wife Mariuora, they died. And Mariuora, he was like the chief of Gatavake. Mariutea was the chief of Gatavake, and his firstborn son was Raekeno. And when Mariutea died, he was replaced by his son Raekeno. And there's Raekeno, there were like 8 sons, and there was a sister. And Tada was the name of the sister, and she had married a chief from Akamaru. Okay? And Raekeno was the chief in Gatavake. And I think the husband of the wife of Tada was Teahu Orangi. And what happened is, Tada and her husband, Teahu Orangi, on that other island, Akamaru, the woman, Tada, she gave birth to a son named Kirikura. And Kirikura, he grew up, he was a young man, he was tall, he was handsome. People thought highly of him. And his uncle Raekeno, he heard good things about his nephew. And he was jealous. And he was thinking, one of these days, he's going to cause problems for me in my calling as the chief of Gatavake. And so he had the intention to kill his nephew. And his 7 other brothers, they were kind of in the plot. And one day a message came to him from his sister Tada saying that her son Kirikura was going to come over to Gatavake and such a day and visit him. And he put into it, and then Raekeno, the chief, he put into his plans. He put into his plans to kill his nephew. And on the day that the boy came, Raekeno sent his second brother, Hakatangi to Uatoto. And that name, Hakatangi to Uatoto, means to cry for the blood rain. And he sent his brother to Hakatangi to Uatoto to greet his nephew, and his nephew came. And what they were doing is, he was in Gatavake. That's where he was a chief. And on the other side of the ridge was Rikitea. And that's where the boy was going to come to. He was going to come to Rikitea. And so Hakatangi to Uatoto, he crossed the ridge and he came down to Rikitea. And he waited, and the boy's mother, Kirikura's mother, Tada, she told him, when you get to Rikitea, land your canoe at Angatipakoki. This is the landing place for the chiefs. And it's next to the marae of Te Tehito. Okay, so this boy, he's a chief, right? He comes to this place at Angatipakoki. And his uncle Hakatangi to Uatoto met him there. And Hakatangi, when the boy came, he had long hair. And he had a whale-tooth pendant hanging from his neck. And he was clothed with a tapacloth loincloth, made from tapacloth. And he carried like a scepter, like one of these, like a chiefly staff. And Hakatangi to Uatoto, he cut off the boy's hair so it was short. He took off the whale-tooth pendant. He removed the tapacloth loincloth, replaced it with a banana leaf loincloth. He took the scepter. He led the boy down the shore to a place called Te Puka, which is where the commoners land their canoes. And so if you look at that boy, he's got short hair. He doesn't have a well-toothed pendant. He has no staff. He's dressed in a banana cloth loincloth, and he's stopped at Te Puka. He stopped at he stopped at where the boy had landed was not Angatipakoki. It was next to the marae Te Tehito. They let him down. He was led down to the shore to a place called Angatipakoki. So when people looked at that boy, he had disembarked his canoe at Angatipakoki, the place for the commoners. He had short hair. He did not have a well-toothed pendant. He did not have a staff. He was dressed with a banana leaf loincloth. And when they went up the hill to cross over to Rikitea, to go from Rikitea to Gatavake, they went up a path called Te Puka. And that's the path for commoners. And there's another path called Manutahu. And it's the path for the nobility. But they went up the commoner path. So when they got over the other side of the ridge, and they came down to Gatavake, everybody thought that this boy was like, he's a commoner. He's dressed like a commoner. He came in the path of a commoner. His canoe was beached at the commoner's path. Big place. And Raekeno, his uncle, when that boy came down, Raekeno had an uncle named Tamiro. And the story goes that kia tu Tamiro ko te iti te mea Tara. Tamiro said, this is the son of Tara. And Raekeno, ki mai Raekeno. Pene ra oki ta Tara. E o ororoa ta Tara te iti, e reito te kaki, e amiko ero. If this was Tara's son, he would have long hair. He would have a well-toothed pendant. He would be dressed in a loincloth of tapa cloth. He would have landed his canoe next to the marae of Te Tahito. And the uncle said, he is a pig from the Atia Nua who has come to fight me and to kill me. And he grabbed the boy's forehead and he pulled off the flesh of the forehead. And they killed that boy and they cooked him. And they ate him. And the flesh of the forehead was baked in a different oven than the body. And the mother, Tara, when she heard that her son had been killed, she went over to Rikitea and she climbed up on the ridge. And she called down to her brother Raekeno. She said, hey, Raekeno, where is your nephew? And Raekeno said, he came to kill me. And the sister called down to him, Tara, the sister, she called down to him, were we not born on the same night? Were we not attached to the same placenta? What a useless birth this was. And she called to each of her seven other brothers, and she lamented, and she condemned them. And then she came down and she took the flesh that remained of her son that had not been eaten, and she took it back with her to Akamaru. Kuahope te irako. This story is done. Now, in the story, there's a kind of a funny kind of a symbol. The second brother, his name was Hakatangi te Uatoto, to cry for the blood rain. And a few months back in another video, I told a story about a woman named Peiku on the Marquesas, and her son was engaged to marry a young woman, and the young woman's father killed her son. And when her son was being killed, the future father-in-law was, doing things and hitting this boy on the head with a stone axe. And he was saying to the boy, he was saying, look, if the blood rain would fall for you, then I would know that you are Polta Atimao. And this boy was Polta Atimao. The blood rain falls for you. And that boy says, let it fall. And the blood rain fell. And then later on in the story, the mother, when her son is killed, she goes up on the ridges on that island in in the Marquesas, and she calls down to each of her brothers, and she calls on them that they have to prepare a war for revenge for the death of her son. And it's their brotherly responsibility, because it is their sister's son that was killed. And they turn her away. At least 3 of the brothers do. Okay? And so she's calling down to her brothers, and her brothers are neglecting their responsibilities as being the boy's uncle. And there was in the killing of the boy, there was this talk about the blood rain. And so here we got kind of 2 stories that are similar. Tada's up on the ridge and she's calling down to her brothers like, why did you kill your nephew, you guys? I'm your sister, that's your nephew. And one of the brothers of the woman's named Hakatangi te Uatoto cried for the blood rain, and he was involved in the plot to kill this boy. And I'm sorry, I am sad for this woman, Tada. Her son was killed, and her brothers did it.